In a quiet town, where mornings always began with the scent of warm bread drifting from a small bakery, and the sound of church bells echoing softly across the streets, there lived a man named Hafiz. For most people who knew him, he was nothing more than a calm, elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. They saw him strolling by the riverside, scattering breadcrumbs for pigeons, or sipping tea in a modest cafe. He looked simple, perhaps even ordinary. But very few people knew the truth: Hafiz was a millionaire. His wealth was carefully hidden behind the walls of his modest home. He disliked showing off, disliked glittering parties or noisy gatherings. He never wore flashy jewelry, never drove luxury cars. To him, true comfort lay in the small joys of life, in morning tea, in neighborly conversations, in soft music playing from an old record player. Yet, despite his peaceful days, Hafiz carried a quiet unease in his heart. It had nothing to do with business or money. It was about his only son, Ramil. The problem in a father's heart. Ramil was young, full of energy and charm. He studied at the university, laughed often with his friends, and dreamed of a bright, exciting future. But Hafiz worried deeply. What kind of man would his son become when he finally discovered the truth about the family fortune? Would wealth spoil him? Would it make him arrogant, careless, or selfish? Hafiz had seen too many stories of young people losing themselves in luxury. He didn't want that fate for Ramil. He wanted his son to grow into a kind, responsible man, someone who could value people more than possessions. One quiet morning, as the sun slowly climbed above the rooftops, Hafiz made a decision that would test the very core of his son's heart. The father's disguise. I must find out who my son truly is, Hafiz whispered to himself. And so, he made a plan. He would disguise himself as a poor man, someone in need of kindness. If Ramil could treat a stranger with care, then Hafiz would know his son's heart was good. He searched through his wardrobe for the oldest clothes he owned. He found a faded jacket, worn trousers patched at the knees, and scuffed shoes with tired soles. He hunched his back, let his shoulders droop, and leaned on a wooden stick as though it were his only support. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he hardly recognized his own reflection. His eyes seemed weary, his beard untrimmed, his walk slow and uncertain. He looked exactly like a poor traveler, forgotten by the world. That evening, when Ramil was expected to return from the university, Hafiz went outside and waited near the entrance of his son's apartment building. The first encounter. The sun had already started to sink, painting the sky in soft orange and purple shades. Birds circled above, returning to their nests, while the street grew quieter. Soon, Ramil appeared. His backpack swung from his shoulders, his face lit with youthful energy. He was laughing softly at something on his phone, music still playing faintly through his earphones. At that moment, the disguised Hafiz stepped forward, blocking his path ever so gently. Please, young man, his voice trembled, carrying the sound of weariness, I am so tired. I have no place to spend the night. Could you help me? Ramil stopped, pulling out his earphones. His brow furrowed as he studied the stranger in front of him. You don't have a place to sleep? He asked carefully. Not tonight, the old man answered, his head bowed. Inside, Hafiz's heart pounded wildly. This was the moment. The test had begun. The test of kindness. For a few seconds, Ramil said nothing. He looked at the man's clothes, his weary face, his shaking hands. The street around them carried its usual life. People passed by quickly, entering shops, heading home, hardly noticing. Would his son walk away? Would he pretend not to hear? Ramil sighed softly, then nodded. All right, he said at last. Come with me. He guided the weary stranger into the building, up the narrow staircase, and to his small apartment. It's not much, Ramil explained, unlocking the door, but at least you'll have a place to rest. For the first time in hours, Hafiz felt warmth bloom inside his chest. His son had chosen kindness. An evening in the son's room. The room was modest, filled with the quiet marks of student life. A desk covered in notebooks and textbooks, a small bed in the corner, a kettle for making tea, and a few photos pinned to the wall, friends, classmates, a family picture. Sit down, Ramil said, pulling out a chair. You must be hungry. He opened the fridge and brought out the simplest food he had. A piece of bread, some cheese, a small pot of tea. He arranged it on the table carefully, as though it were a feast. "Please, eat," he urged. Hafiz, still in disguise, lowered himself onto the chair. His eyes filled with tears he dared not shed. He took a bite of bread, not for hunger, but for the sake of keeping the act alive. They spoke for a long time. The poor man told stories of loneliness and hardship, and Ramil listened with patience, asking gentle questions, nodding with understanding. He never mocked, never rushed, never looked away. When the night grew late, Ramil stood and said firmly, "You should sleep on the bed. I'll take the chair. It's not comfortable, but I'll manage. You need rest more than I do." Hafiz could barely breathe from the swell of emotion. His son had offered him everything he had: food, shelter, even his own bed. He decided to wait until morning before revealing the truth. Morning and the revelation. The first rays of light crept through the thin curtains. Ramil was already awake, preparing tea on a small stove. His movements were quiet, careful not to disturb the guest. "Good morning, grandfather," he said warmly. "Today I have classes, but before I go, I'll take you to a shelter. They'll help you there." Hafiz looked at him for a long moment. The time for pretending had ended. "My son," he said softly. Ramil turned in surprise. "Why did you call me that?" The old man straightened his back, removed the cap from his head, and let his real voice ring clear. "Because I am your father." The silence that followed. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Ramil froze, the cup of tea trembling in his hands. His eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Father. No, how?" Quote. Hafiz's disguise slipped away as he stood tall again, his familiar features now visible. "Yes, my son. It was me all along. I needed to know what kind of heart you carried within you. I feared money might blind you one day. So I came to you, not as your father, but as a poor man seeking kindness." Ramil sank onto the chair, overcome with emotion. His eyes filled with tears. "Father, how could you put me through this? I thought you were a stranger. I wanted to help you with everything I had. I shared my food, my room, it was real for me." Hafiz stepped forward and embraced his son tightly. "That is exactly what I wanted to see. You did not turn away. You gave me the last piece of your bread. You gave me your bed. My heart is at peace now. I know you will never lose yourself in wealth." A peaceful ending. They sat together for a long time, the silence between them filled not with distance but with deep understanding. Outside, the city was waking up, shopkeepers opening their doors, children running to school, birds calling from the rooftops. But inside that small room, a father and son found a new closeness. Hafiz no longer hid the truth. He spoke about his wealth, about the responsibilities that came with it, and about the future that would someday rest in Ramil's hands. But he reminded his son gently. Money is not the goal. It is only a tool. What matters most is the heart that guides it. Ramil listened quietly, his earlier tears drying into a calm smile. He understood now, his father's test had not been cruelty, but love. From that day forward, their bond grew stronger. They talked more openly, trusted each other more deeply. And whenever Ramil walked through the streets and saw a beggar or a weary traveler, he remembered that night. He never again passed by someone in need. And Hafiz, walking once more along the riverside, scattering crumbs for the pigeons, smiled with greater peace than ever before. For he knew his son's heart was good, kind, and unspoiled. And that, to him, was the greatest wealth of all.